breaker, and you just sit in silence, and then when you get moved, I thought maybe Laura had been moved to deliver the message this morning, so I was just going to step aside. That would be fine. Good morning. I'm Reverend Michelle Scott Huffman. My pronouns are she and her. I am a middle age, I've accepted that now, person of average height with spikier hair than Babs, wearing a maroon sweater and navy pants, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Several years ago, in the second or third year of my Doctor of Ministry program, my cohort, which met for in-person classes twice a year, had our January class session in Washington, D.C. and New York City, because who doesn't want to go to the Northeast in January? In spite of the much colder than I'd prefer weather, the trip was amazing, and there was so much to learn. The program that I'm in is called Church and Society Collaborating for Change. Before you get too concerned, it's not about encroaching upon the separation of church and state. Rather, it's about individuals coming together informed by their ethical and faith traditions and working together for a greater good. So bringing the full authenticity of our faithful selves into the public square rather than trying to run things from our own faith perspective. During that trip, we visited what was then the very new African American History Museum. We visited the National Museum of the American Indian, where my classmate Judy was featured in a video. She was sitting there watching herself on a video. That was pretty neat. And the Holocaust Museum, an experience for which I still struggle to find words adequate to describe its impact. But the part of that trip that I'm thinking about specifically today was the visit to the United Nations in New York. And part of the reason that I'm focused on the UN visit is that tomorrow is United Nations Day. Did anyone in here know that tomorrow is United Nations Day? All right. So I'm interested in that, and also the intersection of our theme of wholehearted courage today with a new member Sunday, where we have people joining this church today. And all of that has had me thinking deeply about the choice and the courage required really to join something, or to join a group of someones, as it may be. If I'm being honest, I'd have to admit that I didn't really understand what the UN actually was before I visited. I had heard, talk about the UN all of my life. Usually it was around conversations that had to do with wars and police actions and things happening that seemed violent. And so in my mind, I sort of connected UN with that kind of military activity. I had learned extensively about the Geneva Conventions as a soldier in basic training, but I still hadn't ever really learned much about the United Nations and the good work that it does to promote peace and human rights. So when I got there and I was in the lobby and I was looking at all of these incredible art displays, all of these structures and sculptures and paintings that were all focused on peace, I was overwhelmed by the idea that there were all of these people in the world working together for peace and human rights in such a powerful way and in such a prominent space. So I learned quickly, I was so excited about what I saw there that I wanted to take my kids back there. So a couple of years later, when my daughter graduated from high school and was headed to college to get a degree in political science, I said, no, not until you go to the UN. And so we went, and they both left there with UN sweatshirts, very excited and saying, I'm going to work here someday. And I hope that's true. I don't know. I learned that the UN was about people coming together to work for a common good in a way that none of us could accomplish alone. No country could accomplish those sustainability goals that we talk about when we talk about climate action. No country can alone achieve world peace. We have to work together to get to that. Now, y'all are smarter than me and probably paid more attention in your history and current events classes. And so I'm probably not telling you anything new. But just in case, I want to share some tidbits about the work of the UN and our UU involvement in it. So according to the UN website, which could literally suck a person in for days, the founding document, the Charter of the United Nations, was signed on the 26th of June, 1945 in San Francisco. At the conclusion of the United Nations Conference on International Organization and came into force on the 24th of October, 1945, thus tomorrow being United Nations Day. You may or may not know that within the Unitarian Universalist Church, and I'm sure many other faith traditions, today then would be considered UN Sunday. So I have thus declared today UN Sunday here. The United Nations can take action on a wide variety of issues due to its unique international character and the powers vested in its charter, which is considered an international treaty. As such, the UN Charter is an instrument of international law, and UN member states are bound by it. The UN Charter codifies the major principles of international relations, from sovereign equality of states to the prohibition of the use of force in international relations, something we're hearing a lot about and seeing violations of each and every day in the Russian front against the Ukraine. Since the UN's founding in 1945, the mission and work of the organization have been guided by the purposes and principles contained in its founding charter, which has been amended 3 times in 1963, 1965, and 1973. Article 7 of the charter established as principal organs a General Assembly, a Security Council, an Economic and Social Council, a Trusteeship Council, and an International Court of Justice, and a Secretariat. There are 193 member states, and the UN conducts its work in 6 official languages: Arabic, Chinese, French, English, Russian, and Spanish. It actually makes me happy that English is not the first one in that list, as we always seem to center ourselves and put our language first. The work of the United Nations covers 5 main areas: to maintain international peace and security, to protect human rights, to deliver humanitarian aid, to support sustainable development and climate action, and to uphold international law. So all of that seems pretty important. And certainly it is work that no nation can do alone, as I said. And in case we thought we could just keep our head down and mind our own business and not be impacted by our global connectedness, COVID-19 entered the scene as Exhibit A. And thank all the gods and goddesses and the universe itself for the World Health Organization, the directing and coordinating authority on international health within the United Nations system. So we can probably agree that the UN plays an important role in our world, and we can celebrate that as of tomorrow, that's been the case for 77 years. But did you know that UUs have been at the table all along? There are about 6,000 NGOs, or non-governmental organizations, in consultative status with the UN, and the UUA, Unitarian Universalist Association, is one of those. Now, it may seem like being one of 6,000 of anything doesn't carry much weight, but actually the director of the UU at the UN office chairs and sits on quite a few important committees and working groups. According to the history on the UU website, both the Unitarians and the Universalists were active in the League of Nations Association and closely monitored the creation of the United Nations. In 1946, the American Unitarian Association appointed Elvira Fradkin as an official delegate to the United Nations. And in the 50s, the Universalist Church of America and the American Unitarian Association adopted resolutions in support of the UN. In 1956, Universalists and Unitarians convened the first annual UN seminar at the Church Center. With the merger of the two denominations in 1961, the UUA formed an advisory committee on the United Nations. In 1963, the UUA principles and purposes were merged into one document with marked similarity to the United Nations Charter and to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The founding of the UUA office at the United Nations, called UU at UN, because we like all those U's, can be traced to April of 1962. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations and a Unitarian, Adlai Stevenson, wrote to UUA President Dana McLean Greeley suggesting that each UU congregation nominate an envoy, saying this: "Let me recommend to you the appointment of envoys in UU churches to promote better knowledge and understanding of the United Nations. In this disastrous and shrinking world, it is no longer possible, if it ever was, for local communities to be more secure than the surrounding world. Our ultimate security, therefore, lies in making the world more and more into a community. All of you have had the opportunity to share in the answer and thus help us build a peaceful world." I believe there are something like 500 envoys to the UU at UN that are part of local congregations and help local congregations stay in touch with the work of the UN. In fact, a lot of the conversations that we've been having recently around climate change are informed by the sustainability goals and actions that have been laid out at the UN by all of these NGOs working together, some of them religious, some of them secular, some of them purely educational, some of them in affinity groups, disability rights advocates, LGBTQ advocates, all of these different advocates working together for a more peaceful and just world. Guided by the 7 UU principles, Unitarian Universalists at the UN advocate for international human rights, promoting the inherent worth and dignity of all people, the first principle that we talk about so much. The UUA office at the United Nations gives us a voice on the global stage, carrying out our social justice work through 2 specific strategic priorities: climate justice and demilitarization. From involvement in drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to leading the Faith Caucus to establish the International Criminal Court, to overcoming UN apathy about sexual orientation and gender identity issues, we, UUs, have a long history of providing strong leadership in all aspects of human rights at a policy level. So I want to shift a little bit to talk about what it is to join something, what it is to be a member state of the UU. That clearly was something that the United States was in from the very beginning, but not everybody was in. Not all nations and states are a part of the UN. There's something about joining a group, joining an advocacy chapter, joining any group of people working for something that seems to be sort of countercultural, that takes a great deal of courage. And this past month, we've been talking about courage in lots of different ways. We've talked about social courage and personal courage and just the idea of what courage means at all. But today we're talking about wholehearted courage. And I want to say that I think it takes the best of us to recognize that we have a passion, that we care about something so deeply that we're not just going to think about it individually, but that we're going to join together with a host of other people who care about that thing and work against the odds to bring transformation in that thing. Now, people don't think about membership in the same ways that they used to. There was a time when the thing that you did was be a member of the church, of the Kiwanis, of the country club, right? You just joined the things. It's what you did. And people think differently about joining things, about being members of things today. And so I would submit to you that it takes a really compelling cause to ask someone to join up with you in finances, to join up with you in sharing space, to join up with you in being a cheerleader for a cause in the public square. All of those things take courage, because quite frankly, friends, we know what we can do ourselves and we know how we're going to act and react in different places. But when we get joined up with other people, we don't know. Some of that stuff just goes awry, right? Being in relationship with other people, particularly around things that are really important to us, can be hard, and it takes courage. It takes courage because there's accountability in membership. Because when we join together and we say, I want to be a part of this thing with you, when we disappear for a while, people hopefully reach out to us and say, where are you? Where have you been? We miss you. We need you. Your voice matters in this conversation. And there's some accountability about our willingness to show up in the space and to bring the things that only we can bring, because we are unique individuals with our own gifts and talents and resources. It takes courage to risk showing up in a space that expects you to be a voice, to speak out, to say something is wrong when it appears that something is not going right, to say, I don't understand what's going on here, to say, this is moving in a new direction and I don't know how to go there, but I need help. Please teach me. It takes courage to risk speaking out in that way and being vulnerable. It takes courage to be in a relationship with people who are different from us. People who look differently than us, people who act differently than us, people who grew up differently in different places and different cultures, who understand religion differently, who may be way more conservative than we are, or way more liberal than we are. It takes courage to do those things. It takes courage to try and change the world together, because that's hard work. Someone really wants to talk to me. I have to keep silencing my phone. It takes courage to even imagine that we can change the world. But friends, when we join together with a group of people who believe with us the absurdity that we can make a difference, we actually have power and we can change the world. It takes courage to enter into a space where there's give and take, where one person is not the leader all the time, but it takes all of our different skills and abilities to lead in different ways through different things, to step up when you haven't been fully present enough, and to step back when you need to make space for other people to be fully present and for their gifts to be recognized and affirmed. And I think it takes courage to do any of those things as an individual, but it takes wholehearted courage to do them in community, in relationship, in covenant, in a way that says, when you make me a little bit mad, I'm not going to stomp off, but I'm going to stay here and we're going to work through the tension together. We're going to use tension as a creative force to transform ourselves and the world around us, because that's how we get better. It takes courage. So in the way that the US was a part of the UN from the beginning, and we've worked hard through really difficult things, and in the way that the UU Church has been a part of that from the very beginning, Lots of you in this room have been a part of this community from either the very beginning or pretty darn close to it. And the beauty is that all the time there are new people stepping into this community, stepping in. We're going to sing that song after I'm done here, and I'm very excited about it. Stepping into a community, stepping into something that has been moving since long before we came along, and something that will be moving long after we are no longer here. And so we can make an important impact, but it's not all us. There's so much more about legacies and lessons and generations and the gifts of the ancestors who came before us and the gifts that we leave to the people who will do this work long after us. It takes wholehearted courage. And I am so thankful for the courage that you have shown to be here and the courage that we continue to show to imagine who the world is calling us to be right now. And the courage of the new members who will join in this space today, who will put their eggs in this basket, so to speak. It takes courage, and I think we have it. And I'm excited about what we can do with it. Blessed be, and amen. The interlude this morning is Stepping In.